Hello, everybody. This is Python St. Louis, February 2026 meetup. And today, we're going to be talking about a very important topic, but not as sexy as LLMs and AI, which is testing your goddamn application. So this is going to be using Selenium Grid in order to do end-to-end testing of Django web apps. Now, part of this conversation will be about, when do we use unit tests versus integration tests versus something very high level like Selenium. Now, for those who are not aware, Selenium is a browser automation tool that basically simulates the user's clicks on a website. Okay. Selenium Grid is a set of Docker images that allows you to orchestrate multiple Selenium nodes in order to parallelize or run headless multiple different types of browsers and to have a singular hub to communicate between them. But I forgot to mention this is the outline. Tracking session IDs and CSRF tokens for your authentications, the Selenium Grid, the architecture, how to set up multiple nodes, database setup, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the way that your Selenium Grid works, right? You have your test scripts, and it's going to use a remote WebDriver call to Selenium Hub. And the Selenium Hub is going to communicate with a VNC node that might contain your Edge browser, your Chrome browser, Firefox, Safari, et cetera, et cetera. Now, because there are multiple different features between browsers, and you may want to make sure that your web application works across all of your browsers, this is what you can use. Now, Selenium is not new. It's actually quite old. And for the people who have not used Selenium back in like the older days, right? It was a huge pain in the ass because what you needed to do was to download a WebDriver and then connect your WebDriver to your script, essentially. So you needed binaries, which it's a pain. Nice thing is, with Docker, everything is now containerized. You can literally just pull Selenium Hub, pull your edge nodes, write your script, and it just plugs in and it does plug and play stuff. The other benefit to that is each of these nodes comes with a VNC viewer, which means you can actually view your script while it's going. And because VNC viewer operates as a server, you can run this headlessly in a CI/CD pipeline. So just to give you an idea of it running, let's see, do we have a thinking source? I'm just shelling into my thing right here. Okay, so as you can see, we have a browser within another browser. And the important thing to know that is because this is a browser that you're accessing through localhost, this can operate entirely headlessly, which means you can integrate this within your CI/CD pipelines. You can also do this. You can also do this without using a node, Selenium nodes here, right? You can do that with just a driver and have it run completely headlessly. Of course, that makes debugging your tests a lot more complicated because now you have to toggle stuff between shipping it into a test environment, into a development environment. But this makes it very, very convenient. Okay, so now let me go into here. So this is the interface for Selenium Grid. And as you can see right now, I have an Edge node attached and I have a Chrome node attached. But that's because I have disabled these two nodes here. I'm going to start these up. Don't look at my container history, it's embarrassing. And so now, as you can see, it connects through all of these. And so now, with one test script, I can control 4 different Selenium nodes. Now, I am going to show you a very simple script. All it does is it runs all of these things, ampersand, so it detaches everything. And this one specifically doesn't mutate database state. So bash, run, test.sh. All these spin up. Is there a button for me? Yep, I can just go in here. node live session. Is it gonna work? Come on. You guys saw it. You guys saw it. Don't okay. Okay, this okay, wait. 7900. Damn it! Oh, these passwords. The password here is secret, by the way. As in it's literally the word secret. So I'm just gonna spin these up, and then so we can do 7903. 2.
Why do you have to manually do it?
Huh?
Why do you have to manually activate them?
What do you mean manual activate?
Logging in like that? Why couldn't the application get these spinning for you?
That's not the point.
Like why?
That's just not. It's not. That
automated. Okay, got it.
It's not. Well, you're not supposed like this is for debugging your VNC viewer, right? This is purely for debugging it. Like it's going to run in parallel whether you're not logging or not, right?
I mean, I think you could put, a little more time and you could check that in, but then, you're gonna have to verify storing that game of.
Technically, you can have a Selenium app going in and clicking in and logging in for you.
Yeah.
Yes, but then you would need to have a VNC viewer on top that does it for you. Okay. Yeah, Selenium test, your Selenium test, and just like turtles all the way down, right?
Oh, your Selenium non-testing, your Selenium test. Your
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could potentially run tests in headless from the command line, but then if you want to see what it's doing in the browser, you might need a graphical way to debug it.
Precisely.
Okay.
And you don't need to do any sort of flags to do it because I know there is an option to say run this headlessly, right? And the nice thing is, all the containers, all Kubernetes. So, anyways. Next topic, what was that about? All right. Doing login stuff. If you're really familiar with Django, this part might be a little bit boring, but you know what? I'm going to pretend you guys are not. So here, I need to sign in, right? But if I go into my elements here, and I go to, is there a main thing here? Where's my CSRF? No, it's not the one.
Should be in the corner too.
Okay. I can just do curl localhost. I can't do it from there. Well, I can. Host 8000/login or grep CSRF. All right, cool. So Django is going to embed this little CSRF middleware token inside. And so what you need to do when you're doing a login is you grab that token, right? Parse it from the HTML, and then you pass it into a curl command line argument, and then you can pass in your username and your password for your, kind of your basic login. It's not, but that's what it is. Why do a sub-process call? Why not just use requests? Short answer is, I don't know why request doesn't work, but request doesn't work when you're trying to make this call.
Is request to the Python
Yes.
library?
Python, it only works from the curl command line. Yeah, I see your face, Scott. I tried request. I thought that would be super simple, right? It's just like, but no, you have to use a sub-process for this.
This sounds fun, honestly. I want you to send me your request code and your just your info here, and I'll see if I can make it work.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of suspicious too. I'm like, sounds like a user error.
Sounds like a skill error, right? Yeah. It's a skill issue that you can't get your request to work.
Having suffered through a lot with the Python request library, I'd be interested, but
So it was,
why don't you author your own library, wrapping sub-processes, and run it on a container to resolve issues with, works on my machine.
Well, it's
I'm joking.
Oh, okay.
It's too much work for
Hey, can you open your port? We'll connect and then try it for you on your shell.
Can I?
Do you know how to do it?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
you can open up your computer port if we're all on the same Wi-Fi, and I can directly connect and run your sessions for you through my computer remotely.
Through your Wi-Fi? The
Through
answer
the
is,
same Wi-Fi.
uh,
And then we can test yours.
I guess I can open up port 80. Like,
Don't do it, don't do it.
Well,
the answer is no, I don't know how to do that.
well, in general, with Selenium, are you trying to test it end to end by clicking the submit in the browser? Why do you also want to submit it from a script?
Can you ask that question again? I blanked out on the first one.
Why doesn't your Selenium test just hit the submit button?
Oh, to just log in.
Yeah.
Because that, it's to grab the session ID tokens and the CRSF tokens. So the idea is not to have it logged in. The idea is to grab your session IDs and your session IDs, so then you can inject those in when you're making subsequent API calls.
So you want to test the APIs in
Yes.
addition to doing an end-to-end
Yes.
test with the user interface?
Mm-hmm. Of course, you can log in and run through all of your browser actions programmatically, right? But that's slow. You want to be in a situation where if you have a long-running workflow, right, to be able to checkpoint your states so that you can restart from a different point in your workflow.
Would it make sense to decouple your API test from your end-to-end Selenium test?
Of course.
So your API test could technically just scrape the HTML without using Selenium to get that CSRF token?
If your application is set up in such a way that it exposes a REST endpoint, then yes. But not every single web application will do that.
I was just saying, so hypothetically though, could you just make a GET request to the login page and then scrape or parse the HTML response to get it?
Just the CSRF token? Yes, that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a curl request. I'm gonna be honest, when I was writing this, I didn't think to get the CSRF token directly from a curl request, but you know, I was too deep in the weeds at that point. So yeah. Okay. Anyways, the next part of the talk. Why we don't just do a login, right? Where do I have my thing? Can I do subtracting here? The whole point of this exercise where we click the login button and do all that process and do a curl request is so that we can extract the session ID and we can extract the tokens here from the cookies. So you're going to do a request, it's going to come back, it's going to have some cookie headers, and then we're going to set this variables over here. So now when we have a test fiction here, we can just yield the session info, and this will inject it into your tests. Now, in subsequent tests, we can go into create test to do here. And now we can, instead of programmatically creating our to-do stuff, which I don't think you guys saw that on the screen, so I'm just going to run it again. I am going to first turn off these other nodes so I know exactly which shell I'm in. Stop. This one I'm also going to stop. Okay, so right now it's programmatically entering your tasks, right? And so let's just say you want to test the delete functionality of your application, right? You obviously don't want to just wait for all of this stuff to complete. So instead, you can run this create to do this post request that already has your CSRF token and your session ID inject that you got from that login process, right? And so now you can replay that state using your API. If your web application that you are testing already has a REST endpoint in order to do this, then yes, by all means, do that. Get your token, right, like some other method, and in order to do this. But when I was hired in as a contractor, in order to implement this, right, the application already existed. There was no REST API endpoint in order to say, oh, I am going to call this API. It is going to create that state. And so it's just like, well, no REST API endpoint. We have to do it this old-fashioned way with the forms. And so that's why this became useful. So you can use your CSRF tokens to do your pretend like you have a REST data endpoint, but you're also going to want to interact with your database state at some point. And it's really useful to have, say, this is your Django application here. This contains all of your ORM and your data models. You have a testing layer here that it also has access to the same database, right? And all this does is that it calls the subprocess to the manage.py shell. DB shell, no, shell. And then you can pipe in your model.delete. Okay. You may be asking a very reasonable question. And that very reasonable question is, why not just use a pSQL command or a SQLite command, right? You may have delete hooks that is doing some additional processing on the side. And you may just not know about them, right? Because not every single application is an application that you wrote. If somebody else wrote, every single thing may have side effects. And the thing that you're always asking yourself whenever you're writing all these end-to-end tests, you're working with incomplete information. And when you're working with incomplete information, you want to preserve as much of the original behavior without digging too much into the weeds and making assumptions that are incorrect. So what you can do is you pipe in the delete function in order to do that. And that code is, honestly, it's very simple. This delete task here, right? This is just a Python script. And then you pipe it into manage.py shell. And that's going to execute it for you. Now, your test container is going to have the same environment variables, the same database connection string as the rest of your Django application. And this will do that for you, and it will do it properly. Where is my, what was the next thing I was going to talk about? Okay, yeah. So because you're in a situation where you can run multiple nodes, all of them are going to be able to connect to the same database. You don't want to do this. This is bad because now you have multiple things mutating the exact same state. I will go into later why I set it up this way. But also in Kubernetes, when you're creating your deployments, right, you can have sidecars where you have your web application here. You have your own instance of your database. And then you can have your own instance of your testing container, right? And all of this is set in its own little deletable state. So now, if you're running multiple nodes, it's not going to affect each other. But here's the thing about Selenium, right? Selenium is not the greatest way of ensuring that your app is logically correct. If you guys went to what's Jim's talk, right, on end-to-end testing, what he mentioned was that Selenium tests are very brittle. They are, if your user form, your HTML forms change, congrats, your tests break. So if you want to make rapid changes, the correct test for those, you want to do it at the unit test level. So what is the point of Selenium tests? Selenium tests ultimately, what is really good at that unit tests cannot do, is that it communicates to your stakeholders, the people in your business team that are using your stuff that yes, this application works. I guarantee you, nobody cares about the 500 tests passed, right? As if you're a non-technical user, they want to see that your application works, and that is what Selenium is good for. I am going to go back really quickly. Here. The other way that you can inject the database state is, of course, you can take a SQL dump of your database at that point and then inject it directly into that database that you have. Why did I do it that way instead of just doing all the API requests? Oh yeah, I remember now. Our enterprise application workflow is essentially an entire set of forms that needs to be filled out. And honestly, writing out the requests to implement all those forms and all those post requests, complete pain. So what I did was I ran the Selenium tests in order to get to the state that I wanted. I did a SQL dump. So that now that state is that the database state is where it was as I left it there. And then if I created it, that was basically the state of my database checkpoint. And now if I want to continue on from that, I just load it directly in. The problem with doing that is your database is storing your session info, right? If your database is storing your session info and now you're relying on like old login information, now it doesn't work. So after every single time you reset your database state, you have to perform that login process again to extract your session info. It's just a huge, it's a pain, but it also works. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point? The idea of using Selenium is you want to test everything. You want to also test that operation with the external service. So in this specific application, which is a very simple to-do application, there is one model: create a task thing, delete a task, edit a task. You can do that in unit tests, no problem, because there's no external communication, right? But we have an application that also communicates with a project tracking system that also communicates with something. I'm not too sure how much name-wise I can reveal, but you got application A, which contains information that needs to get pulled in by application by my application, and it also needs to pull by it needs info from this other thing, and what it does is it manages cloud data transfers, right? So there's also, of course, a network a NAS attachment thing here, right? Any one of these connection points can fail. Right?
A different marker.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You have your application that you're trying to test, right? But it's connecting with another service to pull in extra information, right? It's like external service A, right? And it's also communicating with this other service that it does something fancy. And maybe this application is also connected to a network file system. And you as a developer know where this fails, where this might fail. Your stakeholders, the people for which this application is for, all they see is this thing. They don't know what's going on the inside, right? And so,
They better not.
if we because then they'll be taking taking our jobs, right?
I meant from a security perspective, but job security, I guess, is a form of security.
Right. So they may not know what's happening on the inside, all the connections that's the communication that's being made to these external services. The idea of Selenium is you are testing all of that stuff at a level that makes sense for your stakeholders. They get to look at either the end results of whatever workflow your application is managing, or whatever artifacts that web server is going to be testing, and without knowing all these things are working correctly. And that is what makes Selenium powerful. It's ultimately all about the stakeholder confidence, because you can just say, hey, we made a new patch. We pushed it to our test cluster. We ran our Selenium tests. Here's the artifact that it generates. Here you go. Everything works. Let's push this on to production. There's another slide. All right. So how do we do that? How do we automate that process? And it is in. Okay, it is in this little diagram here. So if you do this kind of stuff and you're familiar with the CI/CD, right, you build your Docker image that contains all of your dependencies. You run your unit tests, right, and then once that's good, you push the image to repo, right. This right here is just your usual CI/CD stuff. Now, the way that I set this up is it calls a webhook. It makes a webhook call. So that's just a post request to an endpoint that's running on our Kubernetes cluster. This specific pod has RBAC controls to control plane, so it can spin up and down jobs. And one of the things that it spins up and down is the Chrome node, the web application itself. Because once you push to the latest tag, you need to restart. Your pod so it pulls back down the newest image, and then it executes a test image. Right. Okay, so you have a node A, node B, right, and all of these are attached. Oh, for God's sakes! Right, you can have, if on your cluster, you may have multiple nodes connected to the same network file system, and you may not know which node is going to run it on, which means any files that you're using, say you want to test uploading a file, you need to be able to access those files somehow, right? And you don't know which one, you have to use an NFS. The problem is, generally speaking, your application is going to be sitting behind an Nginx proxy. And Nginx is going to make a check for how big your file size is. There's a limit on, you can't just upload a 100 gigabyte file if your Nginx says, I only want 100 gigabyte file. I only want to accept 100 megabytes, Nginx is going to block it.
I pronounce Nginx as Nginx. Do you think people would get confused?
Yes.
Okay.
What if it was Winx?
Nginx. It's Nginx.
I used to think it was pronounced Nginx. Before I've heard anybody said Nginx.
Well, I used to say Nginx.
Okay, great, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, but Nginx is only one syllable instead of 2 or 3.
Right. Nginx.
Yeah.
Nginx. Nginx rolls off the tongue better than Nginx. Anyways, so you would think that okay, but the preface for this is if you want to test uploading a file, you need to make sure that your browser node, that Chrome node that I showed you in that previous slide, has access to that file. You may think that the most obvious way is to do some sort of persistent volume mount, or do your PVC, your persistent volumes, and then just mount it in there, and it will be able to upload it. It doesn't work. Nginx will think that the file size is too big. So what you actually need to do is you need to build your Chrome node with all of your existing files already baked in before you can upload it, which is a complete pain. But that being said, if you only need to upload it as a test file, right, you don't need to have a ton of test files. It doesn't need to change. So you can't just bake it in there and be like, hey, I want to be able to upload this file, and then you're done.
So I'm not sure if this Nginx is like a public or private instance, but it is a configurable limit.
Yes. It doesn't matter what the limit is. It's going to give you a request entity too large error code.
Yeah.
So I made sure, I checked those configurations. I shelled into Nginx. Right? I looked at the config and I was like, okay, I can't upload it from inside my Chrome node. I can upload the exact same files from my browser outside of Chrome node, and it works fine. So it's definitely not a configuration issue. If I upload the same file with it baked into that container image, it also works. If it's mounted on on an NFS, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I was just saying, when I set up Nginx, usually the default limit is like 10 megabyte uploads, and then I usually change it, but I don't know exactly which Nginx this is.
It's
giving you that error.
No, we've set that parameter.
Yeah.
We've raised that limit to like pretty high. Right? It is definitely more than the file size I can upload, because I can upload it on the regular browser that I'm using, the same exact file. I can upload the same exact file if it's baked into the Docker image. I just cannot upload that exact same file if it is mounted on a network storage drive and then attached to that node. And then that pod can also pick it up. So that is just one of the things I learned. It is a pain. So yeah. If you ever have that problem where you need to upload stuff from a pod, then now you know. The other issue from Nginx is that, generally speaking, your Nginx thing is going to handle your SSL certifications. At least that's the way that it's done on our setup. You could make the argument that you also want to have your actual web server itself to be handling the SSL certificates too, and then you have some sort of internal CA to verify all of that stuff works. But we don't. Once everything behind that gateway, it becomes HTTP again. When it's making that request from outside and then within that same back through the Nginx thing, right? It's going to say you're missing one of your tokens, your connection cookies. No, headers. And it's going to ask you for a refer header as well. So on top of the CSRF token, the XCSRF header, on top of some of the other things, you also need to add a refer header. Due to time constraints, I don't have a demo for those things. I also don't have my laptop hooked up to a network storage device, so there's no way I could show you that failing. So that is the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Does anybody have any questions?
Did you ever look at testing mobile with the Selenium do mobile
Nope.
browsers?
Nope. I just don't do mobile development.
Yeah.
Well, was that no, you didn't look at it, or no, you can't do that?
Would you have to use a completely different tool than Selenium, or for mobile, or?
As in, no, I've never looked at it.
Okay.
Because no, I've never done mobile development.
Yeah, I just meant like a website viewed if somebody viewed it on a phone, but yeah.
I don't know. I think you would need to be able to emulate a phone browser. Maybe there's a way to emulate that.
Most browsers can do that.
Right. Oh yeah, because you can
Yeah.
press
The
inspect.
touch gets a little funky, but most browsers can do it.
Okay.
Sometimes there's different issues like on the actual phone. But
No, for sure, but like most desktop browsers can emulate mobile, and you should be able to access that. I
would think.
Yeah, I mean, I just know like the Chrome mobile view and the Chrome dev tools can still behave a bit differently like than Chrome on Android, technically. I don't know why, I just found one tiny issue
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, mostly the big differences are gonna be in the JavaScript on that end and where your events are at. The actual events that are happening on the end.
Yeah, this was just some weird like UI UX bug with some JavaScript CSS combination. That's probably just some obscure thing.
Safari is a big outlier.
Yeah.
I have not, but I've heard of it.
Chrome on both usually.
It was one of the, somebody else did a talk on something similar. I couldn't copy and they mentioned Playwright.
Yeah, this is newer than
Selenium? Yeah. There's also Cypress. There are multiple ways to skin a cat. I don't know why you will want to skin a cat, but there are multiple ways of doing this. This is just what I knew from back in the day.
If you've never come across these before, I mean, another use case for these is web scraping, where you would have to do some form of, login or something that would be difficult, or, in some cases perhaps impossible to do with the kind of typical make a request and just be a store it kind of thing. You need to interact before you extract web page.
That was originally how I learned how to use Selenium. I worked in a student role in school where I had to extract out all the funding data from the government websites. And back then, you needed to make an account to be able to access it programmatically through an API. They changed it after a few years, but when I was looking into this, you had to actually go into the website itself, click a few buttons to extract out all the data. And so I wrote a Selenium web scraper in order to pull that data.
How
So-
accurate was it?
Huh?
How accurate was it?
What do you mean how accurate?
When you're scraping data, you have to kind of fuzzy match to make sure you're getting the right stuff.
The template, it's a very standardized
So
template.
if they change the website on you, you're still able to go and grab it. When
They
it's a
didn't.
template.
They didn't change the website.
It's a government website, it doesn't change
Okay,
that often.
I'm thinking too modern. Yeah.
They-
Schools change stuff all the time.
They did change it once, and it did break my Selenium tests. But after they broke the Selenium test, their implementation was, okay, wow, now we can curl for it now.
Yeah,
Sure.
got it.
Before it was like a dynamically generated form. It was a pain.